At the reading of the will, I watched as my father snatched a check worth $99 million from my hands and, without hesitation, set it alight. My mother's voice sliced through the heavy silence. "This is what you get for cutting us off." Flames devoured the paper, smoke curling upward as though erasing my existence with it. The others in the room waited for me to break, to shout, to collapse. But I did none of those things. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I smiled, because what they burned wasn't real. My name is Chloe Carter, granddaughter of a billionaire. My parents believed they had destroyed my future that day. What they could never know was that my grandfather had prepared me for this exact moment, trained me to face betrayal, to survive the fire, and to rise from its ashes carrying more than wealth. He had left me the truth. The marble lobby of Harper and Associates gleamed with such brightness it almost hurt to look at. Each click of my heels across the polished floor felt like armor being strapped into place. The receptionist barely acknowledged me, only gesturing toward the glass doors. I stepped into a conference room already thick with tension. My mother, Sarah, sat rigidly with her pearls wound tight around her fingers, her lips pressed so hard they seemed ready to crack. My father, Robert, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his scowl carved deep into his face. My brother Jacob lounged with sunglasses perched on his head, as casual as if this were a lazy brunch instead of a reckoning. Not one of them looked my way. "Miss Carter," said William Harper, the family's lawyer, his voice calm but weighted. "Thank you for joining us. We're here today to fulfill the last wishes of your grandfather, Henry Carter." I sat down quietly, deliberately, my hands folded in my lap. The scent of lemon polish and old leather clung to the air. My pulse hammered in my throat, but my posture was steady. Mr. Harper began reading. "To Jacob Carter," he announced, unfolding a page, "your grandfather leaves the Jackson Hole cabin and his 1959 Gibson guitar." Jacob's smirk faltered, only briefly. "That's it," he muttered. The lawyer's voice remained smooth as he moved on. "To Robert and Sarah Carter, his son and daughter-in-law, he leaves the heirloom grandfather clock, his vinyl collection, and a charitable donation of $10,000 made in your names." A gasp tore from my mother. "Excuse me? That's absurd." My father barked a bitter laugh. "A joke. This has to be a joke." I kept my eyes on the polished wood of the table, letting their outrage wash over me like static. Then Harper's gaze shifted to me. "And to Chloe Carter," he said, measured and deliberate, "he leaves his entire financial estate, totaling $99 million. The room went still. For one long heartbeat, even the overhead lights seemed to hum louder. "What?" my father snapped, jolting upright. "You heard me," Harper replied evenly. "This was notarized 3 months ago. The decision was deliberate." My mother's face contorted, veins rising against her temples. "She hasn't spoken to us in years. She abandoned this family. She doesn't get to walk back in here like some martyr and collect a fortune." I lifted my chin and finally spoke. "I didn't walk back in. I was invited." Jacob scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Grandpa just pitied you, Chloe." Poor little Chloe, who couldn't keep up. But Harper was already sliding a sealed brown envelope toward me. The wax stamp bore the crest my grandfather had carved himself. "For you," he said softly. His last words were clear. She stayed silent, and she stayed strong. She was never forgotten. My fingers brushed the envelope, just as my father's hand shot across the table. His grip clamped down before mine could close, veins bulging, as though the paper itself had betrayed him. "Robert," Harper snapped, his voice sharp. "That belongs to Chloe." But my father was already ripping it open, tearing into it like an animal with prey. A check slipped free, crisp and heavy with promise. He held it up, shaking, his face twisted in fury. 99 million. His voice cracked, too loud for the room. "This is madness. This girl doesn't." I held my breath as if silence might make things kinder. My nails scored crescents into my palms until the pain grounded me. My mother lunged forward with a speed that matched her outrage, ripping the folded note from the envelope and unfolding it like it contained a verdict. Her eyes skimmed the lines, each syllable folding into a sneer that shaped her mouth. "Ungrateful," she spat, voice low and venomous. Then, with a sudden, almost theatrical fury, she tore the letter in two. I asked for it back, my words even measured. She only laughed, a sound edged in spite. Listen to her, calm and collected, pretending she's better than us, she said, and tore the paper into ever smaller pieces until it was nothing but confetti around the crystal. Around us, the room breathed in the rustle of falling paper. Jacob sat back, arms crossed, watching the spectacle with the smug detachment of someone enjoying other people's collapse. Always the victim, Chloe, he said with a contemptuous tilt to his voice. Seems it finally paid off for you. I met his stare without flinching. Enjoy whatever scraps you plan to keep, I said. You can have a battered old guitar and your conscience. I'm walking away with something else. The smirk that had lived on Jacob's face for years wavered, then tightened into something brittle. Before he could retort, my father slammed the check onto the table as though the sound alone could settle everything. He plunged his hand into his jacket like a man reaching for a ritual tool and produced a silver lighter. The click of metal was sharp enough to cut across the room. You don't get to buy your way back into this family, he snarled at me as he thumbed the wheel and summoned flame. The tiny fire hissed alive, hungry and arrogant. Robert, don't you dare, Mr. Harper began, standing to intervene, but his warning came too late. My father pressed the flame to the paper's edge. Black veins of heat spread across the check as ink surrendered and curled under the assault of fire. My mother folded her arms and watched, satisfaction settling into the lines around her eyes. This is what happens to traitors, she said in a voice both triumphant and cold. Burn it. Let her watch. Ash feathered down into the crystal ashtray in slow motion, each flake a dull, obscene snowfall. The air filled with a bitter, chemical tang that grabbed at my throat. My body screamed to lunge forward, to snatch the paper and prove I belonged, but I remained rooted. Every muscle wanted to move. Every memory urged me to claim the evidence before it disappeared. Still, I stood like a statue, calm to the bones, letting them believe they'd won. You left us when Grandpa was sick, my father shouted, eyes wild. You left us when we needed you. My mother's face was smug, the exact expression I had watched for years. Jacob chuckled, the sound low and cruel. Look at her, standing there like she's been sculpted to play the martyr. How convenient. I finally answered. I lifted my chin and spoke quietly so that the words landed like knives. He taught me better than that, I said. Silence can hurt more than shouting. The room flattened into a silence that felt heavy enough to press the air from our lungs, the kind of silence that holds accusations like stones. Beneath the surface of my calm, a different fire burned, not the petty rage they expected, but a steady, cold triumph. They watched the check blacken and collapse into a curled, useless husk. They watched the paper disintegrate and mist away into ash, satisfied, as if they had performed some cleansing sacrament. They believed the act erased claims, rewrote history, and rid them of debts that justice might have demanded. They were wrong. What they had combusted wasn't the fortune, nor even a real promise. It was a decoy, a prop placed there with the care of someone who knew how predictable the family could be. My grandfather had been careful in life and meticulous in death. He understood my family's appetite for spectacle and revenge. He knew exactly how they would respond when offered the chance to humiliate me. He had plans for that hunger. He had set a trap that looked like surrender, but was actually a reveal waiting to happen. As the last curl of smoke threaded toward the chandelier, I felt a slow, private smile unfurl at the corner of my mouth. Let them think they'd torn up my future. Let them applaud themselves for being clever. Let them feel triumphant for a little while longer. They had mistaken performance for victory, conflating destruction with erasure. Their satisfaction was complete and therefore, in its own way, vulnerable. My father slammed the cigarette stub into the ashtray as if sealing the moment. Now we're even, he declared, chest heaving. My mother nodded, triumphant tears glossing her eyes, though they did not reach her face. Jacob, smug and sure, had already composed the post he'd share later, the one where he'd tell the world I'd been shown my place. They sat back, content in the certitude that they had ruined me. I let them have that certainty. It made their downfall more delicious, and their arrogance easier to topple. I had known their moves because he had taught me to see them. I had walked their minefield and found the seams they'd hidden in routine and pride. The paper that had burned was a fake, a careful, blanked-out copy meant to be the bait. The real instruments of inheritance, the legal documents that mattered, were secured where only someone with patience and a memory for detail could find them. He'd left me more than money. He'd left me a way to watch them entangle themselves. The smoke drifted like incense. The room settled into uneasy quiet. They thought I was defeated. But sometimes victory wears the face of placidity. Sometimes you let your enemies dance in the illusion of triumph before you pull the carpet out from beneath them. I inhaled the acrid air and tasted something like vindication. They had burned paper. They had not, could not, burn what was hidden, what had been carefully guarded and not left to the caprice of greed. Their ritual of destruction would only mark the moment they had exposed themselves for the world and for the law. The spectacle they had staged would be the beginning of the unmaking they so arrogantly believed they had completed. I smiled then, not in defiance loud enough to startle, but soft and certain. The fire they lit in that room had only ignited the beginning. The room hummed with soft, strained breaths as Mr. Harper cleared his throat. His gaze found me, calm, probing, like someone who already knew what my parents pretended not to. I gave him the tiniest nod. He didn't need words. His quiet did the protecting for both of us. My parents thought they'd finish me off, reduce my future to embers, yet my coat held the faint bulk of another envelope. It was the one my grandfather had pressed into my hands 2 months before he died. His fingers had been thin, his voice low, but there'd still been a fierce light in his eyes, the same stubborn spark of the man who'd raised an empire from dust. They'll try to destroy what they can't hold, he had told me, leaning in so close his breath warmed my cheek. Let them have their Pyrrhic victory. The things that matter will already be somewhere safe. I had laughed then, nervous, dismissive, thinking him overcautious. Watching the last of the check curl and blacken, I finally understood what he'd meant. The wax-sealed envelope in my pocket bore his crest, pressed deep and certain. I'd opened it the night before the reading, heart racing as if I were stealing a secret. The letter began in his looping handwriting. Chloe, it read. If you are seeing this, then I am gone, and the family that once held me close has started to circle like scavengers. The check you'll be handed is a decoy. They will set it alight and believe they've defeated you. The true legacy has been secured elsewhere, wired, protected, and entrusted to those beyond this household. When the flames rise, do not falter. Smile. That will be your victory. I could still picture his shaky script, deliberate and final. The real legacy, he'd explained, wasn't just money. There were safeguards, allies, and a word that mattered. The second envelope in my coat felt thicker than the first. Within it, wrapped in tissue, lay a small key stamped with one word, Trillium. Grandpa handed it to me without explanation, simply saying, "One day that word will be more useful than breath." In my mind it pulsed like a heartbeat. Jacob scoffed, smirking over the smoking remains. Well, Chloe, lost for words? Or are you finally seeing you're not as exceptional as you think? His face curled into that familiar condescension. I turned slowly, my smile steady and deliberate. No, Jacob, I said softly. I'm realizing you're exactly as predictable as he said you would be. Confusion shadowed him for a heartbeat. I let it sit there. He could stew. Soon, whatever satisfaction they'd drawn from those ashes would feel terribly small. The next morning, I was walking into a different kind of quiet, the marble hush of Langford Private Bank. From the street, it could have been an ordinary, well-kept building. Red brick, iron gate, ivy clinging to the facade. Inside, though, the place felt built like a fortress. Thick carpet ate footsteps. The air tasted faintly of cedar and old ink. The woman at the desk scanned my ID, then softened when she saw the file. Box 12, she said. Mr. Adams is expecting you. Mr. Adams, my grandfather's longtime confidant, waited by the elevators. His silver hair sat in place with the same meticulousness as decades ago. His spine was as straight as ever. Chloe, he greeted, nodding once, the smallest of acknowledgments. Henry arranged this ahead of time. Come with me. We rode the elevator with the quiet that comes when people are carrying other people's secrets. My palms were damp, but it wasn't fear so much as a tight, anticipatory excitement. Grandpa had trusted this man. That alone steadied me. The vault door sighed open with a low, mechanical exhale. Rows of metal compartments filled the room, each drawer tagged with an unremarkable number. Mr. Adams guided me to one set apart, box 12. He placed a brass key into my hand. Along its shaft, almost ghostly, the word Trillium was etched. My throat tightened. He'd mentioned it months before, and here it was, the small proof that I'd been prepared for more than spectacle. The lock turned with ease. The drawer slid free in a metallic whisper. Inside lay three things: a fireproof envelope sealed in red wax stamped with our family crest, the Carter Stallion, a little black velvet pouch, and a thick file bound with a crimson ribbon. My hands trembled oddly as I reached first for the envelope. The wax broke with a satisfying crack. Unfolding the paper revealed another check, real, heavy, and unmistakably genuine. My grandfather's signature looped across the bottom like a promise. I could feel my breath hitch, but forced my hands to remain still, to be deliberate. Then I opened the velvet pouch. Nestled within was a flash drive, small, cool against my palm, clean and unremarkable. Mr. Adams led me to a private booth where a laptop sat waiting. My fingers shook as I plugged the drive in. The screen stuttered to life, and there, with the same study I'd spent afternoons hiding beneath a lamp in the background, my grandfather filled the frame. He looked older, his voice softer than in memory, but threaded with that familiar steel. "If you're watching this, Chloe," he began, "then I'm gone. And if I've judged people right, they've already shown you how easily they will burn the outward symbols of what matters. But you," he paused, and the cut in his voice was deliberate, "you're the one I trust. The fortune isn't the end, it's a tool. Power, influence, and the means to survive. Those are what I'm leaving you. Use them wisely." Hearing his voice made my chest tighten. He continued, explaining in steady, practical terms how to access accounts and which contacts to trust, details that read more like a blueprint than a eulogy. He spoke of layers, legal structures, trusted allies outside the family, and the significance of a single word that would open doors and activate measures he'd put into motion long before anyone suspected. He explained the check in the vault was genuine, $199 million, but emphasized that banknotes alone were not the point. There were alliances to call, properties to secure, and reputations to manage. He mapped out how to move, who to meet, and, crucially, how to make my smile into strategy, not surrender. I pressed my palm to my mouth as his instructions washed over me. There was a strange comfort in the cadence of his voice, an authority that softened the sting of betrayal. He didn't promise it would be easy. He didn't pretend the family would accept it without a fight. But he prepared for that fight, all the same. He wanted me to be ready. When the video ended, the booth felt smaller somehow, the paper thinness of the laptop screen no match for the weight of what I'd been given. Outside, the world would still believe my parents had nothing left to take from me. Inside, behind layers of law and trust and a single carved word, my grandfather had left me tools, money, but more significantly, means and a plan. I slid the drive back into its velvet home and wrapped my fingers around the brass key. Trillium hummed in my thoughts, a small syllable that carried the heft of everything he'd built. Walking out of the vault, the sunlight seemed sharper, the air charged. The ashes in the law office were only surface damage. Their victory felt Pyrrhic now, shallow and brittle. Jacob would enjoy the char paper for a day, maybe a week. My parents would savor their performance of triumph. But their flames had only lit the stage for what my grandfather had already set in motion. I felt a calm spread through me, part vindication, part responsibility. The plan didn't erase the hurt, nor the years of being dismissed. It simply shifted the balance. Outside the bank, I let the key rest in my palm, the skin of my thumb rubbing the faint engraving until it warmed. The world I'd been born into, of polite dinners, veiled insults, and quiet strategic conversations, had always been a kind of arena. Now, with Henry's voice in my head and his preparations at my back, I stepped forward ready to play by new rules. They thought they'd burn me. They mistook spectacle for finality. Let them keep their brief. satisfying flames. The real light, the kind that would reshape everything, was already fueled and waiting to be set free. My chest felt tight with something that wasn't quite grief and not exactly relief, a turbulent mix of both. For the first time since the blaze, a clear truth settled inside me. My grandfather had not simply left me an inheritance. He had left me a weapon. 2 nights after I opened the vault, Jacob was leaning against his black BMW on the curb outside my building, headlights slicing the dusk. He looked casual, arms folded, but there was a strain at the corner of his jaw when he saw me. "Chloe," he called, voice smooth but taut. "We need to talk." I almost kept walking, but something in the way he said it, equal parts order and plea, made me stop. "Talk about what?" I asked, letting sarcasm lace the question. "About the ashes you keep brushing off Dad's shoes." He flinched for the smallest second, then forced a smirk. "You always were sharp. Grandpa probably liked that. But let's be honest, $99 million is too much for one person. Split it with us. With me." I laughed, a low, bitter sound. "So this is family for you?" "Survival." Jacob's posture tightened. "Don't act like you don't need people," he said. "Money won't keep you safe. Dad's furious. Mom wants to contest the will. You can't fight them alone." I stepped closer until I could see the faint tremor when his hand ran through his hair. "You think I'm alone?" I murmured. He blinked. "What are you implying?" "It means Grandpa saw through all of you," I said, quiet but sharp. "He prepared for people like you. He gave me more than money. He gave me proof." Jacob's bravado cracked. "Proof of what?" he demanded. "That you'd stab me the minute it benefited you." I said it flatly. He opened his mouth, closed it. "You chose a side," I went on. "You smiled while they burned it." He had no answer then. Finally, voice small, he muttered, "I didn't think he'd actually leave it all to you." "And that's why he didn't," I shot back. Silence stretched between us, brittle as glass. Cars hummed by. A distant dog barked, but all I could hear was my grandfather's voice in my head. "Silence is the sharpest blade." I turned and started up the building stairs. "If you keep pushing them, they'll come for you," Jacob called after me, desperation bleeding through the final sheen of arrogance. "They'll try to destroy you. You know they will." I paused with my hand on the doorknob and looked back. My smile was thin, precise. "Let them try," I said, then closed the door, leaving him in the mist with only his fading bravado. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old dust, the kind of place where truth either flared bright or sank quietly. My heels echoed on the marble as I walked in, keeping a steady rhythm that masked the storm inside me. Sylvia Orton, my grandfather's lawyer, moved beside me with the confidence of someone who had fought many battles. Her silver hair was swept back sharp as a pennant. In the courtroom, my parents sat together, faces carefully composed. My father's navy blazer was wrinkled, as if he hadn't slept. My mother's pearls flashed like a challenge, her mouth caught in a smirk. Jacob hovered behind them, tapping his foot, eyes like a hunted animal's. Judge Kinley entered. His gavel cut the room to attention. "We are here concerning the estate of Henry Carter. Disputed wills have been filed. Proceed." My parents' lawyer, young, slick, certain, stood first. "Your Honor, the most recent legitimate will clearly designates my clients as the beneficiaries. Any other document is forged." Sylvia rose slowly, each movement deliberate. "Your Honor," she replied, "we submit a legally executed amended will, notarized, signed by Mr. Henry Carter 5 months after the document they reference." A ripple went through the courtroom. My father slammed his fist on the table. "Lies," he bellowed. "Order," the judge snapped, but Sylvia wasn't finished. She tapped her tablet and the courtroom screen came alive with my grandfather's face. Older, but alive in that recording, lying in hospice with a steady voice. He looked straight at the camera. "If you are watching this," he said, "it means they are doing what I feared. They pressured me into signing a will I did not want. I corrected it. My rightful heir is my granddaughter, Chloe Carter. This was my decision. No coercion." The room inhaled together. My mother's gasp was strangled. Jacob buried his face in his hands. Sylvia continued, presenting emails and messages that tied my parents to attempts at pressuring him, and testimony from Mr. Adams at Langford Bank confirming the trust had been set up at my grandfather's instructions. Judge Kinley studied them, the weight of his gaze settling on my parents. "I have seen greed," he said quietly, "and cruelty, rarely so brazenly displayed together." He turned to the counsel. "Miss Carter is affirmed as the sole heir. Transfer the estate accordingly." My father lunged to his feet, fury raw. "This isn't over," he shouted. "Sit down, Robert," the judge snapped. He tapped his gavel again. "I'm freezing your assets pending an inquiry into possible elder coercion and document tampering. Court is adjourned." When he said those words, the sound landed like the closing of a lock. For the first time, I did not feel small under my parents' eyes. I felt something else entirely, untouchable, steadied by the righteousness of what my grandfather had left behind. Outside, the courthouse steps spilled into the city. Reporters clustered, microphones thrust forward. "Chloe, any comment?" someone shouted. "What do you say to your parents' accusations?" I thought about everything they had done when they thought hurting me was the same as protecting themselves. I thought about the fire, the smoldering edges of a life they would have erased without remorse. The judge's words still thrummed in me. I stepped up, voice even. "They already said everything when they set fire to the only love that ever saw me," I said. "I have nothing to add." They shouted more, but I turned and walked away, my heels crisp on the stone. Behind me, my parents stumbled out, disoriented and defeated, my father on the phone, a frantic animal, my mother pale, her pearls cocked and useless. Jacob followed them in silence, head down, eyes fixed on the pavement. None of them looked victorious. They looked exposed and small. I breathed in the city air, which smelled of exhaust and possibility. In my bag, the real envelope rested, trust documents, the USB with my grandfather's message, the check. I carried the legal paperwork to my apartment that night and wrapped my grandfather's old scarf around the items before placing them in the safe at the back of my closet. The scarf still smelled faintly of cedar, a small, human thing that made me feel less like an heir and more like his granddaughter. For years, I had been invisible to them, dismissed, erased, silenced. Now the silence belonged to me, and it had weight. It had teeth. It had been earned. I sat at my desk with a cup of tea grown cold, the city lights pricking the window pane. I let the silence settle around me, snug and final. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought the flames had taken everything. Instead, the fire revealed what had been there all along. I stood, quietly victorious, a woman rebuilt from the very ash they'd hoped would bury me. I allowed myself one small, private smile before the night folded over the city and carried me into whatever would come next.